Hey, in the latest episode of Christ Conscious Practices, we talked about Christ using memorization as one of the ways that he grew and connected in spirit. So this is 14 ways, so it's a lot. It's 14 ways to memorize scripture, poetry, whatever. And these are fairly basic principles, but if there's one that really resonates with you, dive into that. So 14, let's just go ahead and hit it. Number one is start with smaller sections. Break it down, verses, stanzas, themes, concepts, so that you're not trying to get overwhelmed by learning everything at once, but instead that you're really focusing in on what it is that you want to memorize from that section. Now, a verse is fairly easy, a stanza is fairly easy. So if you're not used to memorizing, make sure you start there. Don't try to take a giant block to begin with. Practice with something smaller. Number two, read and reread. Repetition. This seems obvious, but getting that in your mind, sometimes we don't really read it. What we do is kind of glance at it and then we try to recite it. Instead, read it over and over and over again. You may even do a count like in the next 20 minutes, you're going to read over it 100 times. So you're getting that repetition in. Say it aloud. So say it out loud. Make sure that you're even feeling those words in your mouth as you're saying them. So even as you're reading it, don't just stay in your head. Say it out loud so that you're actually going to hear it. And then you can break it down and start reciting a little bit. But it's a powerful way to make sure that you're building a connection between what you're feeling in your mouth, what your ears are hearing. So we're making it a lot more physical. Number four, use memory palace or visual cues. So a memory palace, you may be visualizing a familiar place or space like your house or a walk, and you're placing these images alongside what you're trying to memorize. So it actually becomes part of a memory rather than simply trying to recite words. So look up memory palace and do a little deeper dive on that if you want to. Number five is to write it out. And so this is going to actually reinforce memory, certainly, because you're going to copy the passage by hand multiple times. So just like saying it out loud makes it physical, certainly writing it down makes it physical. And what you're doing is building some synapses within your brain, and you're building connections. So you've built connections with your eyes. You've built a connection with your mouth, saying it out loud, with your ears, auditory, and then physically, you're writing it down. Number six is to understand the meaning. This should have been number one, is to actually think about, what does this mean? What's the idea here? What's the concept here? It's a lot easier to memorize things when we're connected to them and understanding. So a lot of the things that I have memorized are really because they're meaningful to me. It's not simply that I understand them, but I'm connected to them and it has a place within my life. So I'm not simply memorizing because it's something to do. It's actually connected. So think about the understanding, the meaning, the themes that are involved, and it's going to help you internalize it. Number seven, use rhythms and patterns. So if it does happen to rhyme, that works out pretty well. I think that it's pretty good to rewrite things. So not just rewrite it as in copying it down, but you may want to write your own version. That could really be helpful as well. Now, it's not quite as helpful if it's something that is going to be recognized by the masses. But let's say that you're trying to memorize famous passages such as Psalm 23 or Psalm 100. There's nothing bad about rewriting that somewhat to really fit you, and the memory of that may serve you even better. Number eight is chunking. So you're going to break it down in chunks or phrases. For example, instead of memorizing one word at a time, memorize a group of a word. So if you're working with words of 3 group or 5 group or 7 group, 10 can get a little bit stretching, but if you're working at 3 to 5 words at a time and then connecting them along the way in the phrases, it can work out really well. Number 9, use flashcards. These can be extremely helpful for longer passages. Shorter passages, it's great to write it down on a Post-it note, stick it in your car, but you could probably memorize something smaller like that would fit on a Post-it note within 5 or 10 minutes just on your own. But having that reminder of that in your car can be easy. But the flashcards are for longer sections, and you simply want to put maybe 1 or 2 lines per card. And make sure you keep those in order. Go ahead and number those. If you get those out of order, it really gets confusing. And number 10, practice or recite frequently. So if you're really focusing on something you want to memorize, set aside that time and maybe even set a reminder, set an alarm on your watch so that every hour you go over it. So let's say that you're up 16 hours a day. Then make sure you're going over it every hour of those 16 hours. Now, a crazy long passage, you're not going to be able to do that with, but shorter passages, you certainly can. Anything that would take 5 minutes or less to recite is something that you could read over and review every hour fairly easily. Number 11, use technology. So the Bible memory app or a scripture typer, use some tool like that's going to help you memorize. Number 12, link it to a personal experience or emotions. Now, I love the emotional piece because you think about a passage like, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Literally, the Lord is my shepherd. I have no other needs. So when I think about having no other needs, that everything's taken care of, that can be an emotional feeling. And so now I'm connecting it to an actual emotion, and I'm going to have a better memory of it because it's emotional. So even think about your life. Probably your clearest memories are your most emotional memories. Unfortunately, on the negative, when somebody says something extremely hurtful or does something extremely hurtful to us, we remember that a long time. On the opposite side, if we have something amazing happen, we tend to remember that for a long time. Emotions are powerful links, so connect with it emotionally. Number 13, stay consistent and be patient. I am impatient. If I want to memorize something, guess when I want to memorize it? That day. You know, I do a lot better if I'm going to memorize, let's say, the book of Ephesians. I do better by spending all day on a Saturday with it. But here's the thing. You're not going to gain it all at once, most likely, unless you're especially gifted. What I find works really well is to take 2 or 3 days and really push it, and then take a day or 2 off completely from it. Don't try to work on it at all. Another thing that's not on this list originally, but let's tie it in with number 13, is read it before you go to bed. Let that sink into your brain and let your mind just work on it at night. And now number 14, practice with others. This is something we did way back in the day when I owned the gym. I was about 20 years old. So we're talking 36 years ago. Unbelievable. We memorized a lot of books of the Bible. And guys that were working on that, we were working on that together. We would spend, before the workout started, we'd spend time practicing with each other, quoting that. So that worked out really well. So get a partner that you're memorizing something with, keep each other accountable, and help each other with that. So one more time, let me run through the list super quick. Number 1, start with smaller sections. Number 2, read and reread. Number 3, say it out loud. Number 4, memory palace or visual cues. Number 5, write it out. Number 6, understand the meaning. Number 7, use rhythms and patterns. Number 8, chunking. Number 9, flashcards. Number 10, practice reciting frequently. Number 11, use technology or an aid to your memory. Number 12, link it to a personal experience or emotion. Number 13, stay consistent and patient. Number 14, practice with others. Don't try all of those at once. What are 1 or 2 of those that really feel right? For me, it's reading it out loud and writing it down. Those 2 are the best in the world for me personally. You choose yours, but let's get back to this practice. of memorization. Let's get back to having just this vault of things that we can pull from in any given moment. Not to be a know-it-all, but because it helps us. It helps us to have that recall. It helps us to pull that quote in. It helps us to pull that passage in because it enlivens us. You know, I talk a lot about 10:10, John 10:10. He has come that we may have life and have it to the full. Christ consciousness is not about just simply making it through, but to actually have life to the full. If you've not already liked this channel, do it right now. Subscribe and click that bell for notifications. Be blessed.